What's up, y'all? It's Vitamin M here, coming at you with another episode of Bourbon Review. And today, it's very festive today. You know, I got my Hawaiian shirt on. It's summertime. I'm all set here. I'm liking the heat. But speaking of the heat, I'm really packing a punch today. Because today, I want to highlight Colonel Taylor. And I don't think there's any other topic that's really something I've been wanting to touch on. Bottled and bond. So this is Colonel Taylor small batch. These are kind of out there, but you've got to really look for these. It's another Buffalo Trace product, which I've talked about a little bit, but most of their basic stuff is going to be bottled and bond. And I'll talk in a minute here about what that means. But good luck finding a lot of like the, Colonel Taylor stuff, especially any kind of really allocated Buffalo Trace stuff. This thing's kind of lower on that totem pole, but sometimes you've got to go out of your way to find this. This is definitely harder to find than, let's say, Buffalo Trace or Eagle Rare, but it's still kind of basic when it comes to Buffalo Trace products. But regardless, what does bottled and bond mean? Now, think back to your American history here, and I'll take you to the year 1897. So at that time, when bourbon or really kind of any whiskey was being made in America, there were a lot of additives that were put into it that really adulterated the product at the end of the day. People would put like cherry juice, lemon juice, all these different kinds of things, but they would even put like tobacco spit, turpentine, and a bunch of these other things that were really bad for you. But really it would color the whiskey more for it to be darker. So you thought you'd be getting more of a quality product. And there was no statement on any kind of bourbon at all whatsoever at that time saying who made it, where it was distilled, how long it was aged, anything like that. So in 1897, a group of distillers really get together, including Colonel Taylor and James E. Pepper, for those of you who really want to know that. But Colonel Taylor really led the march on this to get the Bottled and Bond Act passed, so that it assured the quality of the bourbon that was out there on the market. And you have to remember too, at this time, most of the medicine in America at this point is whiskey of some sort. So if you're getting bad medicine, essentially, that's not good. You're not getting any better anytime soon. But essentially, the four main requirements when it comes to bottled and bond are these from the Act. Any kind of juice that's in the bottle or whatsoever has to be aged at least 4 years and in a federal held warehouse at that, a federally bonded warehouse as they called it. It has to be made from grains that are from one distilling season, January, June, or July to December of that time. It has to be 100 proof within that. And then finally, I believe the last one is that it has to be, oh, that's right, it's got to be all from one distiller, like I was saying. And the distiller has to be said on the label. If it's not made by a certain distiller, then at least has to say who bottled it at the end of the day. There's a couple other requirements, but those are really the big ones. And there's a cool story when it comes to the 100 proof one. What the tax collectors, since they were at all the distilleries and they were the most despised person at these distilleries, what they would do is they would ask the distillery for each barrel to dump out a little bit on the ground, and then they would set it on fire. If it burned too little, it wasn't 100 proof. If it burned too much, it was above 100 proof. How they judged what 100 proof was, I'm sure they had a system, but I don't know what that was. But bottled and bond was really the first kind of quality statement when it came to any food and drug at that time in America. Hell, this was 9 or 8 years before the Pure Food and Drug Act, and basically the FDA was created in America under Theodore Roosevelt. We cared a lot more about our bourbon quality than our food was at the time, but that's your little history lesson for today. But when it comes to bottled and bond offerings, Colonel Taylor is definitely a really good one, even like their not their barrel proof one, but their single barrel one is really good as well, but their small batch especially. So because this is a small batch, bottled and bond doesn't mean that whatever juice is in here has to come from one barrel in particular. It can be a blend, as we've talked about before. So is this one barrel? Probably not, but that's not a guarantee with the Bottled and Bond Act whatsoever. But other 100 proof offerings that are out there, this one's good. Like I said, some of my favorites are the entire Jack Daniel's Bonded series. I am a very big Jack Daniel's guy, as you guys know, and that whole lineup is spectacular. There's also the Four Roses single barrel, which is 100 proof, whether it's Bottled and Bond. I'm not 100% sure on that. There's Old Granddad Bottled and Bond, which is a great starter. But I really think the best budget Bottled and Bond bourbon, if you really want to get started, is Old Forester 100. Hands down, it's the best one. You get this signature Old Forester taste. It drinks a little bit more with a higher proof without really, the big burn and getting too much of the alcohol. I think it's the perfect budget and introductory Bottled and Bond bourbon, sitting at $22, $23 just about everywhere. But that's my recommendations. Just because something is 100 proof as well doesn't mean it's Bottled and Bond, like Knob Creek 12 or Knob Creek 15 or 18. Don't know if those are Bottled and Bond. Somebody feel free to correct me in the comments, but they are 100 proof. So if it's Bottled and Bond, it's at least going to say it on the label. Keep that in mind. But with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to what Colonel Taylor has to offer today. So Colonel Taylor, like I said, was probably the biggest proponent of the Bottled and Bond Act, but he actually owned the old Castle and Key distillery that Castle and Key has actually revived now. It was literally a castle for the distillery, and he distilled out of there. Very, very inventive and influential man within the world of bourbon. I think he had a lot to do with copper distilling and things such as that. He reinvigorated the process at the end of the day, which is really important. And I know I might be confusing him with somebody else, but I think he had a lot of conflicts with George T. Stagg at the end of the day. Might be confusing him for someone else, but clearly I've had a little bit of this, so no cork. It was pretty good though, but these are exceptionally smooth for what they are. So we'll hold it up in the light. It's a nice little caramel, kind of syrupy color here. Really, this is a little bit of a step up above Buffalo Trace. Really, Eagle Rare has more of a fruity, grapey kind of note, and is a step above Buffalo Trace. This tends to have a little bit more wood, gets smoother. It's on its way to Blanton's. I would put it in the middle of Buffalo Trace and Blanton's, really within their offerings once you get to the allocated things. But good color here, and we'll take a whiff here. Oh, and it's immediately caramel, that syrupiness. Pretty straightforward with what it is. A little bit of oak, but it's a lot of sweetness up front. That syrupy goodness, butterscotch, caramel, that kind of thing going on here. Nothing out of the ordinary, but it's really on the palate where this shines. So let's take a sip here. We drink today, because tomorrow we die. I'll admit I had a lot of chocolate for dessert before trying this, and chocolate and a couple other things can mess up your palate. But still more of that butterscotch goodness, lots of caramel. It's very exceptionally smooth. It's not quite there to Blanton's, but it's a good oaky kind of texture as well. Not as oaky as something like Woodford's, or even like Four Roses. I've got to thank my best friend for getting me to be a Four Roses guy for sure. But really, I like kind of 100 proof stuff. I'll tend to reach for Four Roses over this. But this is still really exceptionally smooth. This is definitely one of, if not the smoothest Bottled and Bonds you're ever going to find out there. With just a very straightforward kind of butterscotch kind of taste to it. Good caramel syrup. It's got a lot of vanilla. It kind of drinks a little bit like a souped up vanilla Jack Daniel's, a little bit kind of like that, but this is very good. A very solid offering. Pretty straightforward with what it's trying to be. I mean, if you can find this close to MSRP for $40, really don't pay more than $50 for this. You can't go wrong with this bottle whatsoever. Don't pay like over 60 or whatever. Somebody is really getting the better end of you there. So with this all here together, this is a solid 7.25 or so. I mean, this is a little bit of a step above Buffalo Trace, but it's a very smooth offering in between the two Buffalo Trace offerings I mentioned, Blanton's and Buffalo Trace. But it goes down very well, and it's very exceptional. And everything in this line gets better. The single barrel, the barrel proof. It's an excellent lineup, and it's a great start to the exceptional legacy of this product and the name brand here. So that'll wrap it up for this episode. Appreciate y'all joining me with this, and happy summer. Cheers.